What is up, Niner Faithful? I am so excited to bring you our first ever mailbag on this channel. Now, I know a lot of you wanted the film breakdown, so don't worry, we're going to be taking a look at a lot of plays during this mailbag segment. So having said that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to get started with Bay Area here. He says, not a question, just a statement. I said in the offseason, we are cursed once I heard about DeForest Buckner being traded and in the manner in which it was done. First of all, I was shocked. He was the heart and soul of our defense, a true Niner, as from being drafted out of Oregon a first-rounder. We built our team around him. He, Buckner, number 99, was that true leader of our defense, not Sherman, as for some has said earlier this year. After my shock had worn off, as my sorrow had started to kick in, I began to let what I just heard sink in. I'm like, what? The Colts? I understand about the draft picks needed, but we didn't have other pieces to offer than to bargain away such a vital part of our team? He was one of the irreplaceable players that we couldn't replace. He was the reason for Armstead's success a season ago. Then, once I saw the manner in which it was done, ugly, I lost the trust in the front office of our team. Even Buckner had felt blindsided and went through a range of emotions. Apologies for the long message. Okay, a fair statement. I think, we traded Buckner mainly because he was due a big contract, and we've got some salary cap issues right now. And, it's true that we can rework some players and rework some things, but there's a limitation to how you can do that. So I know the thinking at the time was, let's trade Buckner and then draft Kinlaw, and he'll be hopefully as good as Buckner maybe at some point, or at least, somewhat as good as him. And then we have him for a lot cheaper. So it's kind of, taking care of the money part and filling that hole at the same time. But let's go ahead and move on to the next comment. This next one comes from Paul Gaither. Keep that film breakdown coming. I personally want to see how guys like Kinlaw are doing. Bill Parcells and his parking lot guys are so important. Sure, this season is done, but who really wants to be a 49er? Who is doing their job well and needs to stay on the roster? What positives do we have moving forward? This is why I want film breakdown. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the first play we're going to examine, and it's going to be a play of Javon Kinlaw. All right, here we get a pretty good look at Kinlaw lined up on the inside. Now at the start of the play, it moves to his left, and he does a good job of just kind of going with the flow, seeing where the play is going. Now Arik Armstead does a great job of taking the outside away from the running back so that he's forced to cut back inside. And when he does, Kinlaw will be waiting for him. Stuffed. Let's go back to the snap. Now from this angle, we're going to get a terrific look at how Kinlaw sheds his block. Kinlaw just keeps his eye on the running back the whole time, and when he has to cut back, it looks like there might be a lane for just a second, but watch how easily Kinlaw just throws Jenkins aside like he's nothing. He tosses the 300-pound guard aside like a rag doll, and then him and Fred Warner wrap up the running back. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next comment. Rice Noodles asks, should the 49ers cut or trade Dee Ford, Arik Armstead, Jimmy G, and Jimmy Ward to save up cap space? Well, we just signed both Dee Ford and Arik Armstead to big contracts, 5-year deals, $85 million in that range. So if we were to cut or trade those players, that would be a big cap hit that we would still have to pay all or at least some of. So you might as well keep those guys around. Dee Ford is interesting because he's got a little bit of an injury type issue going on, but I still think it's too early to cut ties with him. Arik Armstead is producing. He's putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback this year. That first play we looked at, he put pressure on the running back. So he's doing his job. He's not getting the sack numbers that everybody wants to see, but he's still providing reliable pass rush pressure. So To me, it wouldn't make any sense to cut those guys, pay out all that money, and then not have their services. I think we got to hold on a little bit longer with those two. Jimmy Garoppolo is interesting. A lot of folks asked about Garoppolo in the mailbag, so I'm going to address that a little bit later on. As far as Jimmy Ward goes, that one's interesting because we're not paying him quite as much. His contract is for 3 years, $28 million. It works out to about $9.5 million a year. It's not super expensive as far as safety goes. It's outside of the top 10. I think it's 13th on the list. You can check at overthecap.com. So, it's maybe higher than middle of the road, but good safety help is hard to find. That would be something that we would really need to think twice about. Who's going to come in and replace him if we do that. Secondary might be something that we can address in the draft, but again, you only have so many draft picks in a year. You really have to think about what you're doing there. I think for the price, it makes sense to keep Jimmy Ward around. I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if they made a move. I don't think they would just cut him outright. He plays pretty solid for us. So, in my opinion, which is what you're asking for, I would say no, they should not cut or trade Dee Ford, Eric Armstead, or Jimmy Ward. And like I said, Jimmy Garoppolo I will address later. All right, let's move on to the next question. Anthony Wapanis. I'm starting to wonder about Shanahan. Whenever this many players get hurt within such a short time, it could be lack of focus. And as far as Jimmy G goes, the coaches lost confidence in him in last year's playoffs. I mean, come on. No one runs the ball that much with the lead we had and not give some time to sharpen the QB skills right before the Super Bowl. So the question is, what grade would you give Shanahan? Not his play calling, but as the coach finding ways to get the best out of his players. Well, that's a really interesting question. It sounds like there's kind of two parts to the question there is are the coaches confident in Garoppolo? Are they getting the most out of their players? Why did they run so much during the Green Bay game? There's a lot to unpack. So let's talk about the Green Bay game first. If you remember, we actually played the Packers during the regular season on Monday Night Football, and we destroyed them pretty easily. And the Packers, they just seemed like they were not excited at all about coming to Candlestick for their butt kicking in the playoffs. Even after they beat the Seahawks, in the interviews after the game, they're like, well, I guess we got to go play San Francisco. As a fan, I was just really stunned to hear players, kind of openly talking that way. So I think, what you want to do is you always want to establish the run, right? Start off with the run, dominate the line of scrimmage. And the Niners did that, and it just came so easily to them, they kept doing it. And then, one thing you don't want to do as a coach is move away from something that's working. So I think that's why we just kept running the ball. Why change? Did it affect Garoppolo leading up to the Super Bowl? Yeah, it's possible. So what grade would I give Shanahan? That's a tough question. I think when you talk about his overall success as a head coach, I think it's no accident that we went to the Super Bowl last year, right? And I'm not putting that all on Shanahan. It takes a total team effort. You have John Lynch, the general manager. You have Kyle Shanahan. You have the assistant coaches too, right? The defensive coordinator. We have a run game coordinator, a pass game coordinator. And then, of course, you have all the talent on the field. So it was a team effort, but who was responsible for everything that happens on the team? It's Shanahan. Does he make some mistakes? Does he make some questionable personnel decisions at times? Yeah, I think he does. He's still relatively inexperienced as a head coach. He's never been a head coach before, only an assistant coach in the NFL. And this is only his third season. So I'd say, considering all of that, I give him, B+, maybe B- if you want to quibble about it. Might sound surprising to some that I'm not giving him an A right after, we just had this amazing season and went to the Super Bowl. But he does make some mistakes here and there. He's not perfect, but no coach is. So, yeah, I think I feel pretty good saying B+. Todd Ryder says, what are the top 10 players you feel should be cut in the offseason since they can't stay healthy? That's a good question. There's so much more that goes into cutting players just based on their health, even though health is a big factor. So I did put together a little list here to try to answer your question. Not all of these are based on health. But number one would probably be an obvious choice, Ezekiel Anza. He provided absolutely nothing. And, it's interesting. When we signed him, I asked one of my Seahawk friends, what can we expect from Anza this year? And he told me absolutely nothing. And he was not wrong. So that would be one. An interesting name that maybe might come up would be Tevin Coleman. He's on the back end of his deal. He hasn't stayed super healthy. He has not been super effective. He's not the same player he was when he was in Atlanta. The short yardage and catching passes out of the backfield and situations like that where I really expected him to excel, he's kind of just done okay or even disappointed a little bit. So if you're asking me for 10 names, I'm going to put him on there. Another name that might come up in terms of health would be, kind of breaks my heart to say this, but Trent Taylor. He's really hasn't quite gotten on the same page with Garoppolo yet. I think the team is sort of hesitant to make that move because if they can get Garoppolo and Trent Taylor going together, look out. They were a deadly combination on third down way back in 2018. So then you have 2019, 2020, 2021. Are they still trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle, so to speak? That might be an interesting one to watch. Dante Johnson would be an obvious one. He's always kind of a roster bubble player. He kind of floats around to teams and just, gives corner help when it's needed. But obviously not a good long-term solution for us, in my opinion. Ken Webster, another player like that. An interesting name to consider might be Sean Coleman. Also injury-related. Did he break his leg or he did something in the preseason last year when we were at Kansas City. And that was a big deal because that was our swing tackle. That's what brought guys like Dan Brunskill into the fold when Sean Coleman went down. This year he opted out due to COVID-19. So again, I don't know his personal circumstances with that. That may have been entirely reasonable. I'm not saying that we should cut him because of that. What I am saying is he's going to be out of football for 2 years straight now. How much sense does it keep him around when we've been developing other guys further down on the roster? I think we need to sort of figure out what we want to do with Weston Richburg and Ben Garland. Garland is serviceable as a center. Richburg is serviceable. I don't know that neither one of those guys has necessarily excelled. So, especially, Richburg is another guy that's really struggled with injury. To sort of answer your question about whether, these guys can stay healthy. So that would be another name or set of names to take a look at there. One that's not really health related might be CJ Beathard. I think, it's so rare for teams to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster because, first of all, they used to do it all the time, back in the day when the rules were that you could cream the quarterback, when you were on defense, you could just take him out. Then it made a lot more sense to have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Obviously, you're going to need 3 guys if your first 2 guys are going down all the time. In this modern day and age, it hasn't been as necessary, but with Garoppolo's propensity to get injured, maybe that's why the coaches are more willing to keep 3 on the roster. But I don't think that situation will last forever. Both of them are free agents this year. Mullins is a restricted free agent, so we can keep him, but we would also have to pay him a little more. So that's a real interesting situation to keep your eye on as we head into the offseason. And then finally, another name to look at would probably be Jerick McKinnon. Again, another guy on the back end of his deal. missed a lot of time due to injury. Yeah, I think he's played, pretty good considering he was out of football for 2 years. Nobody is expecting Alex Smith, for example, to step right back onto the football field and be Joe Montana. Everybody knows he had a very serious injury, and it's going to take him time to get back into the groove of things. And I would expect the same is true of Jerick McKinnon. The expectations, I think, when we signed him were definitely up here, but we've got to lower those a little bit, considering he, again, has been out of football for 2 years, rehabbing this injury. That might be another guy we cut. So I believe that's 10 names if you include both Richburg and Garland, and I hope I did my best to answer your question. 49er, Sac Francisco. Love that name. That's great. Why does our team overpay so much money to players that in other teams are seen as okay players due to injuries? D. Ford, Richard Sherman. Sherman, I guess, was somewhat worth it, but aren't as talented. Quan Alexander. That's a really interesting question. I think with D. Ford, the issue with him isn't necessarily talent, it's his health. Can he stay healthy and be effective? We saw that last year. When him and Nick Bosa were both healthy, our team was unstoppable. Unstoppable on defense. You couldn't do anything against us because we generated so much pressure. That's a powerful combination. So I think even if they're a little unhappy with D. Ford this year, they might, again, try to catch lightning in a bottle one more time and go for it all in 2021. Richard Sherman, yeah, I'd say he's worth what we paid for him. Is he the top corner in the game? I don't know. When he played a full season last year and was healthy, he had 8 interceptions. That's pretty good. Quan Alexander, you could argue that maybe we made a mistake there and the 49ers moved on, right? We traded him to New Orleans 2 weeks ago. So I guess there's your answer. This is a fun question from Liam Hughes. If you were in control of the team, what would be your first move? Well, gosh, I really don't know. I think I would take a look at what is stopping us from being successful. And in this case, this year, I think the answer is obvious. It's all the injuries. So I would probably want to assess why that is the case. I know a lot of folks feel like they want to take a look at the strength and conditioning staff right away. I'm not so sure I would make that move immediately. We replaced the strength and conditioning staff a couple years ago. Last year seemed to go pretty good, but then this year has just been horrendous. So I don't know if I could necessarily blame it on the staff. I think I would want my players and coaches to have 2 or 3 years of experience dealing with those guys to really know, okay, this is what's working, this is not what's working. And I think this sort of big outlier this year is the pandemic. There was no off season, no training camp, and it's entirely possible that there was a training camp. It wasn't a full training camp. We didn't get the normal amount of workouts we normally see, is the point I'm trying to make. And I think it was Rex Chapman on Twitter that said, these players, they're not wind up toys, right? You can't just stick them on the field and go. You can train in the weight room, you can train individually, but you're sort of exercising your muscles in a different way than when you're on the football field, And it doesn't surprise me that there's a lot of sprains and strains and those kinds of injuries without the normal off-season regimen these guys are used to. And it's kind of unfortunate for us because we just had this amazing season where we went to the Super Bowl and just had a terrific year. And I know I told some friends of mine I didn't even feel like we lost the Super Bowl. It almost feels like we won the Super Bowl, doesn't it? We just had such a tremendous season. So I was really hoping to build off of that success again this year, and then everything kind of just went haywire and. Well, now we're going to wait till next season. But to answer your question, that's probably what I would do is take a really hard look at those injuries and just see if there's something we can do better. Riggs Murta. I'd like to see player spotlights like Richie James, more Fred Warner. All right, let's do some more film breakdown on this film breakdown channel. Let's take a look at Richie James first. Now the 49ers start off with a fake, and the Green Bay defense is completely frozen by this. The player guarding Richie James seems especially flat-footed. The Packers allow the 49ers skill players to just blow right by them here. Richie James goes around his man and then cuts to the inside. And remember, that safety isn't really there. He's backpedaling. Here we can see all the receivers for the 49ers are open. Now, why did Mullins throw the ball to Richie James? Well, it was his first read. The Packers made this way too easy on Nick Mullins, Richie James, and the 49ers. Watch this spin move here. Whoop! On this play, the 49ers send Richie James in motion. As you can see, no one from the Packers goes with him. This tells the 49ers it's probably a zone. Now, look at the big, wide open hole in this zone. So the 49ers decide to get the ball to Richie James immediately. Get the ball into the hands of your skilled players and let them do the rest. Now watch number 67, Justin School. He's going to completely whiff on this block, but it doesn't matter. He got in the way and allowed Richie James to go around him for big yardage. A for effort. Here, Green Bay makes another major mistake on defense. Two players mistakenly go with River Craycraft, and absolutely nobody goes with Richie James. Now Mullins spots him, but this ball is a little bit underthrown, and Richie has to come back for it. In fact, he even goes down to one knee to catch this ball. Now the safety comes over to deliver the hit, but James very quickly gets back up, makes a miss, and takes it into the end zone for a touchdown. Very impressive. Okay, let's take a look at some Fred Warner plays. Here the Packers set up a screen, but Fred Warner tracks down the running back immediately, and the Niners defense swarms and makes a nice open field tackle. Let's go back to the snap. Now the Packers start off with a run fake, but Fred Warner doesn't rush into it. Instead, he keeps his eyes on the running back. Maybe he has coverage responsibility here, and he just sort of tracks him down and then makes a great open field tackle. Very nice. Let's take a look at another one. All right, 3rd and 5. Key play here. Now this play is a total disaster for Green Bay. The 49ers are not only going to rush their 4 down linemen, they're also going to send both Dre Greenlaw and Jaquiski Tartt. In addition to that, they're also going to send Fred Warner. Now we're going to zoom in on the Packers' offensive line here. So you're going to see every one of these guys false starts. They all move. You see the 49ers pointing. Now the center turns to say something to the running back. That is allowed. And what he's doing is he's calling a blocking audible. This is the funniest thing you guys are ever going to see. They're going to ask the running back to try to block Fred Warner on the blitz. And well, I'll let you guys see the results. That play was a complete disaster for the Packers, and Rodgers just throws the ball away. Now watch how easily Fred Warner just blows by him. Now, this ball was not catchable, so by rule there should be no pass interference, but a flag comes in, and you can see that Jason Verrett is hopping mad. All right, let's move on to the next question. Let's get back to the mailbag. All right, Barry is back with another question. Cool new trend you're starting makes your podcast that much more desirable. The film breakdowns are supremely detailed. Definitely one of the best, if not the best. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. My 49er question is actually a two-part question. My questions are, do we trade Jimmy G? And if so, what team? My thoughts were Chicago for Trubisky, better fit for the Niners' mobile quarterback, or to Jacksonville or Atlanta for draft capital. Just food for thought. Well, it's an interesting question. Like I said, there's a lot of Garoppolo questions in this mailbag, and I guess we'll start answering some of them now. I don't think we trade him. He's got somewhat of an expensive deal, but again, it's not nearly as much as some of the other quarterbacks we're seeing around the league. So I don't know if there's much incentive to trade him. His injuries could be a problem if they deem it being a problem. But again, this year is kind of an outlier. We went to the Super Bowl with him last year. I don't think they're ready to pull the plug on him quite yet. And again, if you get rid of him, you have to think about who you're going to bring in to replace him. And between you and me, Shanahan has not been very good with other quarterbacks, right? His record with C.J. Beathard and Brian Hoyer is awful. Nick Mullins I think he's probably below 500, even though we all like him, and I think he's an excellent backup for us, and heck, maybe he could be a starter. Tough to say. But I just don't think we move on for him quite yet. If we were to do it, Trubisky is an interesting name. I'm not a fan personally, but he is mobile. He might be a good fit in Shanahan's system. He does come a little bit cheaper. He makes only about $7 million a year, so that's actually only slightly more than we would be paying Nick Mullins if we kept Nick Mullins around. So that would be an interesting concept there, especially if the Bears are happy with Nick Foles. And then as far as trading him for draft capital, that's always a possibility. We need to acquire more picks. We're going to be the team is always going to be changing. There's constant change in the NFL. I also wouldn't count out New England, right? I mean, they really liked Garoppolo there. And, Belichick is going to probably make some big changes in this offseason. The Patriots aren't very good this year. So those would all be things to look at, but I still think that they are going to stick with Garoppolo for at least one more season, but we'll see. Keith J. Cross says, outside of getting guys healthy and upgrading the quarterback, what other parts of the roster need upgrading the most for teams to contend next year? I would say probably one of them would be offensive line. They're a little banged up. They haven't necessarily been as good in pass protection as you would like, in key situations at least. And, there just seems like they're constantly shuffling guys around, moving guys around, and it's never quite what we want from them. So that might be something to look at. And then also the secondary. Richard Sherman's going to be another year older. Jason Verrett's playing great. Emmanuel Mosley is starting to get picked on a little bit. I think he's doing the best he can in the situation. But, between adding another corner, maybe taking a look at the safety situation, those two areas, offensive line and secondary, I think would be sort of the standout parts of the team that could use some upgrading. I think the tight ends are good. Maybe you add another tight end to complement George Kittle. The linebackers are good. In fact, Dre Greenlaw's ascendance made it possible for the 49ers to trade Quan Alexander to the Saints. The defensive line is good. Kinlaw's coming right along, and between Eric Armstead and then, of course, when we get Solomon Thomas and Nick Bosa back, it's going to be that same ferocious defensive line. And then the wide receivers, Ayuk looks like he could potentially be really good. So that's sort of something exciting to watch. And then running back situation also looks good for us. We've got Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. So I think we're pretty good across the board. We might need to re-sign Kyle Juszczyk, but other than that, as far as upgrading the team, I think I would focus, if it were me, I would focus on those two areas, offensive line and secondary. Alec Bolino, Do the 49ers keep Jimmy Ward next year, or does Tarvarius Moore finally get to start? Well, I think they keep him. Like I said, his contract is in a place where he can play one more year for not a ton of money, and I think he plays pretty solid. I see no reason to elevate Moore over him. Doesn't mean that they won't or they can't make moves there, but I think they do keep him for one more year. Dave Cahill. And by the way, guys, 1,000 apologies if I'm botching these names. I'm doing the best I can with them. He asks, what's your favorite 49er game ever played? Will you do a breakdown of it, and why is it your favorite? Well, I thought long and hard on this question because there's been just so many great games that the 49ers have played. I mean, you have Montana, Dwight Clark, the catch. You have, the Super Bowl 23, where Montana threw the game-winning touchdown with just seconds left to John Taylor. There's a lot of games in the 94 season that are really great. Of course, the Super Bowl with Steve Young. You've got, Frank Gore going for over 200 yards multiple times. I got to attend one of those games in person. Alex Smith hitting Vernon Davis with the post. I was at that game. So there's just so many good games that I really had to think about this, but I think without question the game that had the biggest impact for me, it was such an emotional impact, was when we beat the Packers in the 98 Wildcard game. Green Bay had eliminated us 3 years in a row. And it was just it was maddening because we had a Super Bowl team. This was the same team essentially that played in the 94 Super Bowl. There were some roster change, of course, over a 4-year period, but we had a really good team year in and year out, and year in and year out, they kicked our butts out of the playoffs, and it was just so frustrating. And it was like the pressure for this one game was unbelievable. But it was so emotional watching it, just every twist and turn, and it coming down to those final few seconds. And then, of course, Steve Young hits Terrell Owens with game-winning touchdown pass with just 3 seconds left on the clock. It was absolutely incredible. I wish I could have been at that game. I was at home, and me and my dad got the chance to watch it together, and we were just screaming at our televisions. We were so excited. And our neighbors, way down the street said they could hear us, and it was just such a crazy, crazy ending to that game. Very emotional. And I don't know if anything will ever top that. And, the funny thing is the next week we were eliminated by the Falcons. But for me, that's the 98 season is probably one of my favorite seasons, if not my favorite season. That was Steve Young's last complete year. He was older by that point and still brilliant. He threw 36 touchdown passes that year, which was a career high for him. And this is under the old rules when it was a lot harder for quarterbacks to throw that many touchdown passes in a season. And just to illustrate how impressive that was, Russell Wilson has still never thrown 36 touchdown passes in a season. He's probably going to do it this year, but keep in mind, this is in the modern game where with the modern rules. Steve Young did that 20 years ago. So just a phenomenal season. I would love to break down that game. The NFL does not really provide all 22 footage going earlier than, I think it's 2009. So it would be hard for me to, really do a proper breakdown of that game. We did actually look at a play from that game last year when we were doing a breakdown of the Cardinals game. And we did discuss one of the plays in that game. So I'll include a link to that in the description below. Kendrick Jude Masisa, do you still believe in Jimmy Garoppolo? If not, do you think that the 49ers should trade up in the draft in order to get a QB? And that one is followed by, should he stay or should he go, Jimmy G? And then opinion on tanking, drafting a quarterback, and cutting trading players with big contracts, Armstead, Ward, Ford, Jimmy G. So, yeah, like we already said, a lot of Jimmy G questions. Already addressed the Armstead, Ward, Ford contracts. And again, I think that regardless of whether the 49ers draft a quarterback or don't draft a quarterback or whatever they do, I think they keep Garoppolo for another year. And again, try to catch that lightning in a bottle one more time. Yes, I still believe in Garoppolo. He is the man. He makes terrific throws. He's got a lightning quick release. He makes throws that other quarterbacks can't make. His yards per attempt is among the all-time highs. I mean, we're talking like NFL lifetime leaders. His yards per attempt is right up there with him. So I think that it's frustrating when we see him get injured and then not play very well. But we have to just realize that's part of the game. Injuries are part of the game. My opinion on tanking is John Madden used to say the worst thing that you could say about somebody was that they lost on purpose. I don't think we should even entertain that idea. Do teams tank? I think it's more like their heart really isn't in it because they're losing so many games and they're just like, well, I mean, whatever happens, happens. But I don't think anybody outright loses on purpose. That would kind of go to the integrity of the game and your integrity as a person, right? So there's my answer to all of that. No, I don't think we should tank. We already talked about the contract, so we're probably keeping those guys, and I think we're probably keeping Garoppolo, and I still believe in him. Jimmy G is the man. Are there 49ers on the bench who are better than the starters in front of them, i.e. James over Bourne, Moore over Ward, are the more glaring ones I see? What do you think, Carlos from El Paso, Texas? No. That's why they're on the bench. James over Bourne is interesting. You know, I know some people have called for James to get more action on the field because of his short area quickness and Trent Taylor-like abilities. He had a good game on Thursday, so we might be seeing more of him. If he produces like that, the coaches will continue to put him in. But they also use him for kick returns and things like that, so I think it's more that they're just managing their personnel. And I'm not necessarily down on Kendrick Bourne like some other folks are. He's, you know, last season he was so clutch. He came up clutch in these big moments over and over again, including making very difficult catches in the end zone, which is huge. But, you know, he's not a wide receiver one. And when Debo and Ayuk aren't out there, teams are going to, you know, put their best corner on Kendrick Bourne, and he's not as productive. You know, that I can't argue that. Is he better than Richie James? Well, they have kind of different skill sets. Bourne is a little bit bigger and stronger, you know, whereas James is sort of a smaller, quicker guy. So maybe they use him in different situations, but I don't have a problem with Bourne starting over James. And I wouldn't have a problem with James starting over Bourne. It's just how the coaches choose to use him. And Ward over Tarvarius Moore, we already kind of talked about that a little bit. You know, Ward's play it's not, you know, the spectacular safety play that, you know, we were kind of used to seeing in San Francisco back when we had Deshaun Goldson and Dante Whitner. But it's really solid, sound play. And I think the coaches really value that, and that's why Ward is starting. All right, Dave is back. Oh, and most underrated player, current and past. This was kind of a fun one. Most underrated player currently, you know, it's kind of a tough question because when you think of underrated players, you maybe think of players that don't quite get the respect they deserve around the league, right? So we might recognize that they're great players, but maybe the rest of the league doesn't. So I might say a name, and you're going to say, Josh, that's crazy. How can you say that guy's underrated? He's great. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I mean, we know he's great, but does the league know he's great? Is he underrated? So I think one obvious answer would be Fred Warner. Now, he's starting to get that recognition around the league, so I don't know if that title is appropriate any longer. So I might say Kaywon Williams. You know, it was the number one slot corner last year. I don't know how many people really know that. He's been awesome for us on the field, and I just don't think he gets the widespread recognition. So a pass player, that's a really tough one. I'm going to say a player that I always liked in the past. I don't know how good he was or wasn't, or how much recognition he got around the league, but I just don't really hear his name brought up anymore, but I always kind of liked watching him play, and that was Marquez Pope. I loved watching Marquez Pope play in the 90s. So I'll say underrated player, current and past, Kaywon Williams and Marquez Pope. All right, Nash Potter asks, what will be the fate of Trent Williams after this season? Do you think the 49ers will draft a new O-lineman? And I want to know, just like everyone else, what will the QB situation be at the end of the season? Well, Trent Williams has played pretty good for us. He has a high PFF grade if you're into that sort of thing. And we brought him over for a reason, and I think we will re-sign him. I don't think it'll actually cost us too much. Let's see. I mean, left tackles, they can be a premium. So I'm kind of 50-50 on that. We've got a lot of, balls in the air that we're going to have to juggle at the end of the year. So he could stay or he could go, but I think they will re-sign him. The quarterback situation, again, I've already said, I think they keep Garoppolo next year. The backup situation is completely up in the air. You can keep CJ Beathard for cheap, or you can keep Nick Mullins, and he's going to be a little bit more. He's going to be in that $4 to $5 million range. So they're going to have to make a decision there. And all right, let's move on to one more question. Adriel says, my preference would be a breakdown highlighting players we don't normally get to see much of, and any plays that were unique or used uniquely to try to manage the personnel we had available. That is a great question, and I have a couple of plays ready for you, so let's take a look at them. Okay, there's 44 seconds left in the half, and the Packers are going to try to go down and get some points. Now I want you to watch how the defensive end completely blows by the left tackle here and gets a sack on Aaron Rodgers. Pressure from the edge, something we haven't seen a whole lot this year. Let's take another look. And there we see number 78. Who is that? That's Jordan Willis. That's the player we just traded for from the New York Jets. And in his first game as a 49er, he gets a sack. That is cool, and maybe something to watch. I'll show you one more play. Now you saw how quickly the camera panned from the time down to the field. So let's count the number of plays San Francisco has here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Too many men on the field. You're only allowed to have 11. But I want you to watch Jason Verrett. Now, Rodgers knows that this is a penalty. It's a free play. But watch his ball skills here. Look at him break on this ball. Now, I know he's not a player that, we don't use a whole lot or, use uniquely, but he is a player that's had to step up, in the face of Richard Sherman getting injured. So I thought that would be an interesting play too. And finally, we're going to take a look at our last question here. All right, Barry X. What makes Nick Bosa and Dee Ford so much better edge rushers than the backups the 49ers have brought in to replace them? Surely it is a question of learning the technique of how to beat the lineman in front of you. It can't be that difficult to learn technique, can it? P.S. I love your game breakdowns. They are brilliant. Barry, thank you so much. Well, is it difficult? That's a loaded question. Yes. These techniques, you got to remember, these are the absolute masters of their game. The elite of the elite. The best players in the world. So it's not only that you have to learn the techniques, but you have to master them. And you have to master them better than anyone else. And it definitely helps if you have some phenomenal athletic ability to go along with that. And not everybody has that. Everybody has different skills and tools and talents that were given to us. And people have to learn how to use them differently. In the case of Nick Bosa and Dee Ford, they were gifted with incredible physical talent. But I believe what probably makes them so good is they probably work harder than anyone else too, mastering those techniques, getting them down perfectly, probably starting from a pretty young age, high school or earlier, and just getting them down to an absolute science. And that's what makes them so good. It's what sets them apart from the other defensive ends in the league. So that's my best attempt to answer the question. And hopefully it'll, it's good enough. So, I really don't know what else to say. That concludes the mailbag. This was a monster mailbag, a long video, 45 minutes. I hope you guys enjoy it and get a chance to watch most of it. It's kind of like almost like a TV show, I guess. Just put it on a Friday night and kick back and enjoy. I am exhausted. Obviously, it takes a long time to make a video like this. This one took several days. If you could just take a few seconds and click that like button, I would really appreciate it. I want to thank my subscribers. I especially want to thank my new subscribers. You guys are awesome. This was so much fun. Next week, we're going to go back to the traditional breakdowns. I heard you guys loud and clear. That's what you guys want to see. We'll do some more mailbags. Maybe we'll do one during the bye week or something, or we'll do one in the off season. We'll pick a good time to do this again because this was fun. But we'll go back to the breakdowns that you guys enjoy so much. It's going to be a fun game against New Orleans. That's that is setting up to be like, you think, well, we have so many players injured. The Saints are going to walk all over us. They want revenge from last year. But maybe the Saints will overlook us. Maybe Shanahan can do his thing and Nick Mullins will have a good game. And we're getting a lot of players back. We had half our wide receiver core out last week. And I think we're getting a few other players back too. So you never know. It's the NFL. You never know. It's going to be a fun game to watch. We're going to break it down no matter what happens. And I will see you guys then.